To check our next speaker is ready. Perfect. Okay, well, we are back. Thank you all so much for joining us for our second half of this session. I'm really excited to introduce Tia Gandhi. She is a master's student currently studying for a master's degree in cognitive neuroscience at Durham University. She already has a degree in psychology and is investigating whether people with PSP or Parkinson's disease find it difficult to read and recognize emotion based on bodily movements when compared to out of control. She's hoping that this will be able to help researchers understand how people with these conditions recognize emotions in aiding diagnosis. So I will pass over to you, Tia, and let you share your slides.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, just give me a second. I seem to
No
have
worries at all.
an issue sharing my screen.
That's okay. Someone had a similar issue this morning and said that they did it in presenter mode, which worked
Yes,
rather than showing the window.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. So hopefully that'll work out. I've never had this issue before.
No worries, it happens sometimes. Just while we're getting that sorted, just a reminder that you can all put your questions in the Q&A box down at the bottom for Tia once she's finished her presentation, and she'll be able to go through those. If you think of questions later, you can always drop them to me in an email and I'll put my email in the chat so you can send those across to me.
Hi, sorry.
It's all right. Do you want to try again? And then if not, we
This should
will.
work. I think it was just an issue with
There we go. They're
Just
coming through now.
okay, perfect. I hope my screen is visible.
At the moment, we've just. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. I'm usually not this technologically challenged. It's just a new laptop, I think. But anyways, thank you so much for patiently waiting. My name is Tia Gandhi. I'm a postgraduate student researcher at Durham University. I hail from India, as Megan has clearly stated. And I'm currently studying bodily motion recognition in progressive supranuclear palsy and Parkinson's. This study is part of a much larger grant and a bunch of other ongoing studies that are taking part at the Department of Psychology under Professor Dan Smith and Professor Atkinson at Durham University. And previous studies have explored facial emotion recognition in progressive supranuclear palsy and Parkinson's. And this is just an extension of that project. If I could also get a little bit personal, like I mentioned, hail from India. And when I was in India, my late grandmother suffered from PSP for 13 long years. So this is something that's quite important to me. And I'm extremely grateful for the PSP Association, via which I've been recruiting most of my participants. And Megan, who's been lovely and very, very accommodating and super nice and helped me out throughout this. So just to give you a little bit of a background of the study, I'm sure most of you here in some way or another have some sort of a lived experience with progressive supranuclear palsy in one way or another. So I won't delve too much into that. But what's important to note is that PSP is the rarer of the two. Like I've mentioned a statistic here, for every 100,000 people, there's around 4 to 6 people that are diagnosed with PSP, as opposed to Parkinson's, which is the second most common of its kind. And research has also already established that individuals diagnosed with both PSP and Parkinson's struggle with emotion recognition and have emotion recognition deficits. And which I will touch upon later as well, is that previous studies have mentioned that individuals diagnosed with Parkinson's struggle with negative emotion recognition, specifically sadness and disgust, while individuals diagnosed with PSP might struggle with recognition of emotions that are highly intense in nature, such as happiness or sadness. However, research that has been published after these two papers have come out have yielded mixed results. We've seen papers that state that people with PSP also tend to struggle with negative emotions, and people with Parkinson's also tend to struggle with recognizing emotions that are intense in nature. And therefore, we've reached some sort of a plateau in in the field of cognitive neuroscience about emotion recognition. So the whole aim of this research is to understand emotion recognition from another viewpoint in these two cohorts, in these two clinical cohorts, using bodily emotion recognition, which arguably may be just as important as facially expressed emotions, if not more important. And so we do that using what we call point light displays of emotion, which I'll touch upon later into the slides. But basically what that means is we isolate emotional expression to just body movements as opposed to facial expressions and any other contextual cues. And that's one aim of the study, is to understand how emotion is processed without any facial or contextual cues using bodily expressed emotions in these cohorts. But I suppose the broader aim of the study would be to understand the differences between these two groups. Um, I think someone brought it up in the Q&A session for the previous studies as well, is that PSP is often misdiagnosed as Parkinson's. And very often it's years before you find out it's actually PSP. And that's purely because of the rarity of the condition and the overlapping symptoms. And there's no sort of accurate diagnostic tools that helps you differentiate between the two. So our aim through this is to basically understand if there exists profound differences in emotion recognition, and whether these differences are large enough that it may help understanding a little bit better whether it's actually PSP or Parkinson's. So this can help in a host of clinical interventions. It can help in early diagnosis. It can help in differential diagnosis. And hopefully this is a step forward towards more tools in accurate diagnosis of PSP. Let's also quickly touch upon why body movement matters. When I talk about body movement, I'm talking about anything that includes speed, posture, gait, and energy of movement. In conditions such as these, especially in PD where we see facial masking and sometimes in PSP as well, it limits the expressive range of an individual. And therefore, it becomes important to understand how they perceive bodily cues in themselves and in others. And that's one of the efforts that we're trying to do with this study. Another research has already stated that we judge emotions of others partly on the basis of our own movement patterns. What that basically means is that, say I'm someone that walks quite slowly. If I come across someone that walks slowly as well, I'd be inclined to think that they're in a neutral state of mind, or they're expressing a calm state of mind, as opposed to if I'm someone that walks quite fast and I come across someone walking quite slow, I might be inclined to think that they're sad, right? So it's important to understand bodily emotion expression in context of this as well. And perhaps this could be a future direction of further research in these conditions as well. Let's also quickly go over the neurological basis in these two conditions. Emotion recognition, like I've mentioned here, involves a lot of brain regions, a host of brain regions, which includes the amygdala, the superior temporal sulcus, the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, the substantia nigra, and so on. And impairments in emotion recognition can stem from neurodegeneration, like we see in such conditions. And like I mentioned and touched upon earlier studies have discussed how individuals diagnosed with PD suffer from deficits in recognizing negative emotions such as disgust and sadness. And individuals diagnosed with PSP in some studies have shown to have deficits in recognition of intense emotions such as happiness and sadness. And therefore, the whole aim of this research is to understand whether movement kinematics, such as bodily expressed emotions, um, can offer similar results, or if it can clear out the mixed results we've been receiving in the last 5-10 years on emotion recognition, which can have great large implications in the clinical field and in interventions tailored to PSP and PD. And the hope is that it can help earlier diagnosis. That's the basic ethos of this research. I'll quickly also touch upon what it means by a point light display. When I say we're measuring emotion via bodily expressed emotions, we're using what we call point light displays of emotions. I have a quick clip to show you um, what it means to take part in the study and what kind of stimuli you'd be coming across. When I say point light displays, I'm basically just talking about emotions that we depict using only dots that are placed on certain key body points and key joints. And it removes any confounds that can affect bodily emotion expression like clothing and background. So we've called people into the lab and we filmed them, and hopefully you should be able to see my screen. It's quite a short clip, so I'll play it again. But you can see someone jumping, and I'll play it once more for you. So that would typically express happiness. And we're testing 5 different emotions. We're testing happiness, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And so there's 50 different video clips like this to test 5 of these emotions, so there's 10 of each. And we've seen in other studies how point light displays have been effective in studying motion-based perception. And they've been crucial for testing, and it can be crucial for testing in patients with impaired facial recognition, such as these conditions. And I'll quickly go over the study design. We have 50 point light displays of emotions, like you saw the video before. So we have 50 of those depicting 5 different emotions. So there's 10 of each. And participants basically undergo and take part in an emotion recognition task that I've coded to be completely online. So you can do it from the comfort of your home whenever you're free. It should not take more than 30 to 40 minutes. It's a fairly simple task. You see the emotion, the point light display of emotion, and you get to choose between 5 different emotions and pick which you think the video accurately depicts. Before the emotion recognition task, however, there's a few questionnaires that participants will also answer. You have the Beck's depression anxiety, the Beck's depression inventory, the Beck anxiety inventory, and depending on the cohort you belong to, uh, if you belong to the Parkinson's cohort, then you'd be answering a Parkinson's quality of life survey. Or if you belong to the PSP cohort, you'd be answering the shorter version of the PSP quality of life survey. Like I said, should not take more than 30 to 40 minutes and can be done from the comfort of your home. This is just a brief example of the kind of questions that will be asked in the inventories. So in the Beck depression inventory, you have questions about sadness, about discouragement about the future, failure, feeling guilty, and so on. And sorry about that. And in the Beck anxiety inventory, you have questions about certain symptoms that you may have felt in the last month, and asking you to rank it on the basis of severity. And the same with the PSP quality of life survey, just to give you a brief outlook of what that entails. So that's basically what participation entails: a few questionnaires and 50 videos or point light displays. Now, going on to the clinical relevance of the study, like I mentioned earlier, this would help in diagnostic insights, would help in communication strategies tailored to psychosocial interventions, and can also help distinguish disease-specific profiles from what we may previously consider as age-related changes. I'll just quickly go over the general FAQs we get as in the department by previous participants. what happens to you when you take part. Just to reiterate, it's an online emotion recognition task. It requires you to participate online on a laptop. You can't do it. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to code it in such a way that it runs on a phone or a tablet. So it requires a PC or a laptop. And you'd be asked to answer 3 questionnaires depending on your cohort. If you belong to the clinical cohort, that'd be 3 questionnaires. If you belong to the control cohort, which we're also actively recruiting for, that'd be two questionnaires regarding symptoms of depression, anxiety, and suicidality. Participation is also completely voluntary. You could choose not to answer any questions in the survey if you feel uncomfortable or if you feel like it's something you would not want to answer. That's completely all right. Having said that, if you also feel like you may want to withdraw from the study globally as a whole, you're completely free to do so. We also do not take any information that can link you, that is identifiable to you. As soon as you take part in the study, we give you a unique identification number that we can track back to you, and we don't take any identifiable information, so it's completely anonymous. Which also then means is that if you submitted the study, we may not be able to go back and delete your response, but the option to withdraw at any time during the study is completely there, and you can always withdraw whenever you want to. uh oh, sorry, I'm having issues with this. Again, there should be no risks involved in participation. There should be no physical discomfort apart from any headaches or strains that you might feel when you use a computer for longer periods of time. Should be no psychological discomfort or embarrassment. Like I touched on earlier, you can withdraw from the experiment as and when you like. We only can't withdraw your data once you've submitted the experiment. Unfortunately, there is no compensation for taking part. And this is something we're looking into for future projects. And data is kept confidential. And this is just a call for participants as well. We're currently recruiting participants diagnosed formally with Parkinson's or PSP between the ages of 55 to 85. I'm extremely grateful to the Parkinson's UK organization, through which I've gotten around 70 participants with Parkinson's, and the PSPA, where I've received recruitment from individuals diagnosed with PSP as well. Recruitment shuts in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I know it's a bit of a time crunch, but if there's anybody willing to participate or interested, they can always reach out to me via the email ID mentioned below, or if they feel like they meet the criteria, they can just use the study link mentioned here in the PPT and then run the study through that. I would also be very, very happy to send across the participant information sheet or any other, or answer any questions if they may arise. I usually tend to answer within the hour, so I'm quite prompt. So if there's anybody that's interested in participating, we'd be very, very, very happy to include you as a department. We're also actively recruiting individuals to take part as controls between the ages of 55 to 85 from any part of the world. So if you have any friends, family within the age group that you think would be interested in taking part, please feel free to send out my information or send them the link. As of now, like I said, I have 70 participants with Parkinson's, around 4 with PSP. I am hoping to recruit a whole lot more, but I understand the severity of the condition limits this, and the rarity of the condition limits this. I have around 16 people who have taken part as controls, but I'd love to have more. That would enhance the statistical reliability of the study. So if there's anybody that can take part as controls, we'd love to have you, and I'd love to answer any questions. But I think that was it from my end.
Thank you, Tia. It sounds like a really interesting study.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to hear about, so obviously there's a clinical benefit for this. How do you see this working in a clinic? Would it be that someone would sit and do the videos in a clinic, or is it a different kind of test you would envision?
So the whole idea is for it to be accessible to everybody, considering how rare PSP is. It's scattered, we have patients scattered across. So the whole idea is for it to run online, or for it to sit in a clinic. If you go to a clinic, you have it available online to run on a tablet. We're still working on converting this to a version that runs on iPads and phones and so on. But as of now, this is the best that we could do. But yes, the idea is that they run it online. And I wouldn't go so far as saying that this is the only thing that will distinguish between PSP and Parkinson's, but it's definitely something that could give you more insight into the differences between the two, um, and can definitely be something that can be administered in clinics, if not in person. The hope is that it runs in online in clinics.
That's really exciting. Obviously, because this is running online, it is more accessible to people living with PSP across the whole of the UK. Why did you choose that method to conduct the research rather than having people come into clinic, where you might be able to kind of get other information from someone living with PSP?
Right. You're very right in asking that, because obviously this doesn't by running a study like this, I'm not checking for the stage, and I'm not checking for the medicine and stuff like that, right? So obviously that has its own limitations. But the reason we chose to run this online is basically this is also some sort of a pilot study to the bigger grant. So we want to basically understand if there truly exists a deficit. It's one of the very few studies that use point light displays or bodily expressed emotions in clinical populations such as these. And if there truly exists a deficit, we can run a much larger study, which again, I guess would have to also be run online, because it's just not feasible to travel or to ask participants to come into the lab. Again, I'm sitting in a lab in Durham, which is quite further up north, and we're hoping to get as many participants as possible. So the best way to run it would be online.
We really appreciate that it is being run online. It gives people who want to take part in research or who might have issues traveling to research centres something to take part in, which is something we hear from people living with PSP, as well as corticobasal degeneration, time and time again, that not all research is accessible for those with mobility issues. So we really appreciate that. Rebecca, did you have any questions?
No, I don't. Just to say that I think it's a really interesting study. Sometimes we kind of have a very fixed view about what research is about, and I'm always fascinated by the huge range of things that are going on, and actually that, helping with diagnostics and prognosis isn't all about blood samples and CSF
Right.
fluid. It can be about a lot of things. Are there any limitations on your control group? Do they have to have sort of no neurological conditions or anything else? What's that?
So that's the hope. But because I've not received that much interest in taking part, we've added another question in the survey to check for any other neurological conditions. Because, like I said, this is mainly a pilot. In the main study, we'd like to have participants as control groups without any neurological conditions, any other psychiatric conditions, or any change even within the PSP cohort and a PD cohort. We'd like to have people who have not changed any medicines in the last 6 to 8 months, because that obviously makes a big difference. But considering this runs as some sort of a pilot to a much larger study, and we were having trouble accessing participants, we've just added questions within the survey to control for that, and something that we'll mention in the study as a limitation.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps people, if family members say to them, "What can I do to help?" they could say, "Oh, well, you could go and be a control on this study.
That would be very lovely. I
Jump up,
understand
jump up
that
and down."
I understand the time is my data audit is due in a few weeks, so I understand it's a very limited time frame. But
Okay.
any